Okay, so this is the video for the Sprint 5 individual video submission for group number 5. My functional area is member management, and my name is Omar Rahman. So I'll be going over every bulleted list as that's my only reference that I have in terms of what to talk about in this video. So if there's any questions outside of that, then I guess go ahead and ask. Obviously, you have the code on GitHub, so there's that. But starting off, the function runs without errors. I'm going to assume that means I can compile my project and actually run it. So we use a conjunction of Maven and Docker. For every service that we have a Docker container associated with it. So you can see on the left right here, we have MVCs for all of the functional areas. We have the microservices, and we have the databases. Uh, and then we have our Docker compose file right here, which actually sets all of this up so we can compose it once it's done. But first it has to compile with Maven, which it is done now. So if I go ahead and hit Docker compose up, I can go ahead and start building all of the images. And it will actually show up right here once it's done. I should be able to see all of them. They're already running because I already composed up from before and I never composed down. But they'll continue running when this is done. As you can see, they just exited, and they're almost all done. There we go. Okay, it looks like all of the services or the containers are running. So you can see right here we have, oh, it's freezing up on me. We have databases for all of our functional areas. We have microservices, and we have the MVC for all of our functional areas. And it runs, no problem. I can go ahead and open up. This is our hosted website, but I'm just gonna check on localhost. Uh, Profile ID equals 1. And there you go. You can see that it is up right here. Um, and yeah, so there is the entire website running, and this is my functional area that runs just fine. Okay, so this is the second bullet point, the explanation of the MVC pattern or the model view pattern, implementation in diagram and code. So I think this is much easier explained if I just go over member management right here, the subsystem for member management, and in specific the component section. So right here you can see that I have a controller, a model, and a view. This is the MVC pattern. I implemented a passive MVC pattern which pretty much has the controller doing everything. It sets all of the data inside of the model, which is the set feedback, the set uploads, and the set comments. And then it also adds a view, and it links the model and the view together so that the view can access all of the information inside of the model, which we set right here. Um, and then the controller can do all of the logic behind it. It can get all of the information it needs through microservices or whatever means it needs to. So you can see right here it calls the get member feedback, the filter by attribute, uh, and then it calls its own microservice, the get member comments, add comment, get member details, all of that. So it does all the most of the logical portion, while the model itself just holds the information and the view is just displaying it all. So going to the actual code section of it, I won't go line by line what every single piece of code does, but I will do like a general overview. I think if you want to see the implementation, you have access to the GitHub, so you can look at that yourself. But this is the member controller, so this is equivalent to the controller diagram or the controller component. And then this is the model, so this is where all the information is stored. And then the view is the profile.html, which shows everything. And it is using timeleaf in order to access the model information. So the big bulk of the information here is the public model and view profile method. This is pretty much how this is the endpoint for profile, which shows the entire profile page. So the first thing here is I use a model and view object, which pretty much gets you a model and it gets you a view, or it gets you a view and it gets you multiple models, and you can pretty much uh, set set the view so it has access to all of the objects inside, which are the models. So right here, I'm requesting a member model through, I think it is called dependency injection through Spring, and it gives me a model, and that model is what I add as an OBJ. Right here, you can see mv.addObject obj, so that's its name that I'm referencing, and then it adds the model class, which holds all the information. I'm also requesting a parameter ID, which is pretty much the member ID in order to access who or which member I'm trying to look at. And then right here, this is pretty much all getting all of the respective information that I need for the model. So you can see model.setComments. That's gotten from fetching the comments, which is its own separate method. So if we go to the get comments, you can see that I'm calling an endpoint. This is starting to get into microservice territory, so I'll go over this a little more later. But generally, I'm just using an HTTP request in order to access the endpoint and get the information as needed in this is my own microservice, and then this is done for all of the other microservices. As you can see, the MS feedback, MS upload, and the MS member. So yeah, that's getting all the information. That's pretty much getting all of that, and then setting it inside of the model. So you can see model.setComments, model.setFeedback. So that's all the information in here. And if I go into the profile, you can see that it's actually using the information with the obj that I said earlier, and then .username, which I believe Timeleaf is internally calling the get command for those usernames, but I'm just accessing the variables. That's all I really care about. And then right here, I'm just looping through the feedback list and then displaying the comments and the title for the media. So yeah, I do the same thing with media. I do the same thing with comments. That's pretty much just looping through and displaying everything in the model. And you can see that very clear. If I go to, this is the official website. If I go to localhost though, /profile, you can see that I have the username right here, has all of the feedback posts, loops through the media, and all of the comments. So the MVC pattern also supports adding a comment. So if I add like test 5, hit the add button, it says comment submitted, go back to the profile, see test 5 is now here. So yeah, it works. And that is pretty much the last thing I wanted to go over in terms of the view. So right here, the view, you can see it calls the profile endpoint. It goes to the profile endpoint, and the method is a post method. So instead of going to the get one that we had right here, it calls a different one, which is the post. And that's because it is submitting a comment, and it's pretty much sending in a comment model class, which is what we have in our common module right here, which is just all of the common classes that we all use. So comment right here, you can see has a member ID and a comment. And right here, it is getting the comment of whatever is inside of that text field. And the member ID is just the parameter itself. It is getting the parameter through request.getParameter. And then when you submit, it's calling the endpoint. So right here, you can see that I am posting the comment, which is again calling another endpoint and sending it a JSON file with the correct information inside of it. And then it's sending in a new model view pattern, which is just the comment submission one, and that links you back to the original page, and that's the white screen that you saw. Now, I could go over more of this, but I'm just about to with the microservices overview. Okay, moving on to the next section, which is explanation of microservices and implementation in diagrams and code. This is also going to be a two birds with one stone sort of deal because it's also going to cover the function accesses data repository since my microservice does access uh, the data repository. Um, so getting started with this, if you look at my subsystem diagram, you can see that I have the member detail service here, and it has a controller and it has a service, uh, which the service actually accesses the database itself, and the controller just accesses the service in order to handle the endpoints. Similar to how the profile controller has the endpoint for profile, the member detail service controller has the endpoints for the API calls. So if you wanted to make, or if you wanted to get member comments, then you would just send an HTTP request and get a JSON file in response, or um, whatever format that you want. So going into the actual code section of this, oh, and I should say the main gateway that it adds is get member details, which is called get member by ID right here. There's a little bit of discrepancy because of the endpoints versus the actual method names. They are different. Um, oh, actually, one more thing I wanted to show is actually the uh, UML class diagram right here. You can see that the profile controller is pretty much controlling everything. The profile view just gets information from the profile model. Model doesn't really give or doesn't really care about profile view at all. Um, and then the profile controller knows about member service controller, but the member service controller doesn't really care about profile controller since it's just this is the endpoint. It includes all of the endpoints in order to access the database. And then the member service is the actual access of the database itself, except it has its own internal um, comments and members in order to fetch from the database. And then this controller just converts that into something usable by the entire subsystem, or I guess the entirety of Gamgur, because we have a common folder which includes common classes like feedback, comment, and member. So actually going into the implementation of this, going into member service right off the bat, you can see on the left side here, I have a whole bunch of supporting classes right here. I didn't include these in diagram because they were necessary for implementation, but not for the understanding of how uh, how the microservice works, or I guess how the class diagrams work. So you can see I have a member repository and a comment repository because I'm accessing two different tables here. These are pretty much linked up to these are linked up to the database, and if I actually go to member repository, you can see that it has a member class right here, and then that member class is just the same thing as the common, except it is actually mapped to the database itself. So you can see the table, it has the name of members. Um, the column, it has member ID, username, and signup. And if I go to the member init.sql, when I actually create the table, it has the same thing, member ID, username, signup. So it just maps all of this to a tuple inside of member init. And then the repository is just getting all of that. And of course, we're using Spring Boot, so it handles all of that for us, which is really nice. The member service, very simple. Getting member details, all it does is it loops through the repository, and if it's the same thing as the ID that was given, then it adds it to a list and returns it. Get comments by member ID, literally the same thing except for comments. And then adding comments is just adding or just saving the comment to the repository, which is very easy with one line of code. Now, I should again reiterate that this is a local class, and if I were to return this, then I don't think that the other functional areas would be able to use it because they do not have access to this class. It's contained in its own Maven module or Docker container. So that is what the member service controller is used for, as well as using it for the actual endpoint for the HTTP requests and making it publicly available. So all it does is it calls the respective method. So for get member details, it calls it member service.get member details, and then it converts the list, the internal list for member, into the common list for member, which is right here. You can see this is a regular member class, which everyone has access to and are expected to use whenever they need a member entity. And all it does is it converts it. And it's the same thing when you're getting the members. So yeah, that's their whole thing. And it uses a JSON format, which I can actually show using Insomnia in just a second here. But I want to go over the rest of this first. So right here, I have post mapping, add to comment. It just consumes a JSON file again, and then all it does is call the service and add to comment. And then right here, all these are doing are just the actual conversions itself. So this is pretty much all the logic, similar to how the MVC controller was. Now, if I look at the rubric right here, it has makes and uses microservice calls. So right here, as I said earlier, it uses microservice calls. So we're going to go ahead and test one right now. The post comment. This is using my own microservice, which is add comment. So we can test this two ways. If I actually go to the web page, refresh, I can go ahead and add a this is MVC. Add it back to profile, and you can see it's right here. And then through Insomnia, through a post request, I can also add it. So member ID is 1, which is what's matching up here. And I can go ahead and add this is Insomnia. Send it. Okay response. I hit the refresh, shows it right here. And just to prove that wasn't fake, I can go ahead and choose my ID as 2, and you can see that it doesn't show up here. So if I add another comment, and just add the same thing, refresh the page, there you go, adds it to the right place. So there are obvious microservice calls right here. Again, I didn't go through each line of code because I feel like if you wanted to do that, you could do that since you have access to our GitHub repository. But this is pretty much how it works. And again, there's a lot of extra extra classes here which aren't too important in terms of understanding how the system or the microservice works. And I should probably go over the last bit, which is the database, considering this was already going over databases. The member init.sql is pretty much the whenever you open up the container, it tries this and it creates these tables and then inserts these default values because we just needed something to test that's universal. So yeah, it just adds all of this stuff, and this is the default values. You can see right here, this is the Docker file. It just opens up Docker, and it sets the username and password so you can actually access it if you wanted to through Docker right here, which I can actually do real quick. If I do Docker PS, I can just access the SH. Go ahead and find it real quick. There it is. Enter. I do Docker exec. It's paste this sh. And now I'm in, and now I should be able to do su postgres psql. I believe it's that. And then I called mine member database. And if I do /d, you can see that I have everything here. So database does in fact work. This is not like an internal thing. I can go ahead and get all of the comments for ID1. So I can just do select star from comments. Oh, actually, where member ID equals 1. There you go. And you can see all of the comments right here. This is Insomnia, this is MVC, test 321, test 123, test 5, has all of these, and has a comment ID as well. So this is a database that is working. Okay, so these last few bullet points should be very fast. Mapping from UML to code possible. I feel like I've already gone through this, but I have my UML diagrams right here, and I did map all of them. I didn't include all the classes, but this gets the gist of it out of the way. I'm obviously using Spring Boot in all of this, but if you need more proof, I can actually go to my pom.xml file right here, and it shows you I have a I'm importing Spring Boot right here, Spring Framework. So there's my Spring Boot. And then the final thing is use of data from another student's microservice. I already went over this, but just in case you didn't catch it the first time, right here, I have get feedback, which is in my member controller, and it is accessing the MS feedback endpoint for get member feedback, and that is another person's microservice. So I'm accessing somebody else's. So that should be all the bullet points. Again, if you have any questions, please leave them in. I don't know if you wanted me to go through all of the code in specific, but you have access to it if you need it. So yeah, thanks for watching.